Ladies and gentlemen, I have a special guest coming in. Tommy Robinson is absolutely a legend.
I've been prosecuted under terrorism legislation. On the 27th of July, we held Britain's biggest protest at that point, or patriotic protest at that point, which was 100,000 patriots gathered together in Trafalgar Square in London as a unity against the government. I was entertained under the Terrorism Act. Now, so you understand, and do you know their words were, "We know you're not a terrorist. We know you're not a terrorist, but we're allowed to do this." And then it got to the point where they then said, right, passwords for your phone. Now, I'm a journalist. I work as a journalist. So I have, as a journalist, my sources of information are protected. So I said, I'm not giving you, the police or the state, access. What are you going to do with this? And they said, well, we're going to download everything on your phone and download everything. I said, but why? You haven't done anything wrong. But I'll get my verdict now on the 4th of November. Maybe on the 4th of November, I'm a convicted terrorist.
You are like one of the most prominent people standing up against jihadists and the rape of young women and all of this other stuff. You think that's why? You think that they have gotten to a place where they hate strong, white, prominent people who are willing to stand up for the values of the historicity of their country?
They hate the values that built this country. They hate Christianity. They hate free speech. So the people who govern us hate everything that we hold dear and everything that made this such a beautiful nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a special guest coming in. Tommy Robinson is absolutely a legend. And it is crazy that they want to put this man in prison for standing up for free speech. And this just speaks to the lunacy that's going on in the West. And so it is my pleasure to welcome to the show, Tommy Robinson.
Thank you very much, bro. Thanks for the introduction.
All right, man, let's get right into it. You went to you had a trial earlier today, and the verdict is due on November the 4th. Now, why in the world are you in trial? What's going on there in the UK?
I've been prosecuted under terrorism legislation. So the allegation was that I pulled up at the border in the UK, but in fact, let me give you the backstory to it. On the 27th of July, we held Britain's biggest protest at that point, or patriotic protest at that point, which was 100,000 patriots gathered together in Trafalgar Square in London as a unity against the government, bringing people together. We set up this organisation 2 years ago. We sat down with a plan and a vision, which was change the culture, you change the politics. Rather than trying to change the politics first, change the culture, because British culture has been under attack. Identities have been under attack. Mass immigration has affected it. We've been made to feel embarrassed and humiliated by our identity and our history. So we had this vision to set this up. We brought together 15, 20 influencers who have all been cancelled, attacked, sidelined, smeared, and said if we come together and we agree on 5 major points, and those points are around culture, protecting young girls from sexualization and rape, which is now known as grooming gangs, free speech. If we come together, then we have a larger reach than any of the mainstream media overnight. So we decided to work together. We started wanting to celebrate identity. We held our first event, 30,000 people. Second event, 100,000 people. The next day after that, I pull up at the border. I drive in my car. And what we find out today in the court trial is I pull up and the gentleman asked me, where are you going to? I said, I'm off to Benidorm. And they said, pull over there. I was entertained under the Terrorism Act. Now, so you understand, and do you know their words were, we know you're not a terrorist. We know you're not a terrorist, but we're allowed to do this. And what this power, so it's like the Patriots Act. What this power does is they after terrorist attacks, they bring in new legislation and laws which take away your rights and freedoms, because at British airports and British ports, you have no right to remain silent, and you have to give them your passcode. So I was sat down for 6 hours, and I was questioned. And what's come out today in court is nothing about terrorism. Every question was about my legal, lawful, political activities and my political ideas. So terrorism act under terrorism legislation, and then it got to the point where they then said, right, passwords for your phone. Now, I'm a journalist. I work as a journalist. I've done a 5-part series called The Rape of Britain. It's an amazing documentary series. You can watch it at trfilms.co.uk. It's where, you know, what we now know as grooming gangs. I go after the grooming gangs. I tell the survivors' stories. I find corrupt police officers, politicians, all in this documentary series. So I have, as a journalist, my sources of information are protected. So I said, I'm not giving you, the police or the state, access. What are you going to do with this? And they said, well, we're going to download everything on your phone and download everything. I said, but why? You haven't done anything wrong. So I refused that. I've then been prosecuted under terrorism legislation. Now, the crazy thing about this is, remember the attack with Axel Rudakabana, which was the Southport attack, which was a young male who had already been part of the Prevent counter-terrorism scheme. He then had a Al Qaeda manual. Again, that's a terrorist charge. He had an Al Qaeda manual and he had ricin. But our government and our politicians and our police forces bent over backwards to make sure the word terrorist was never used. Never used. He was never prosecuted under anything to do with terrorism. I, a journalist with no crime, no suspicion of a crime, and what we found out today in trial was that it took, because they say I acted suspiciously when first being questioned. Now, on the CCTV, when I hand my passport in, 30 seconds it is from when I'm pulled over in my car. So there was only one question, and that was it. And it was like, pull over there. So I pull in my car, and the officer admitted today that when he saw me, he knew who I was. He knew I'd held the event yesterday. And what this is, I don't know if you've seen in Europe or certainly in Great Britain, is because the biggest threat to this nation is Islamic jihad and Islamic terrorism, and they want to fudge the numbers. So they continually, the Prevent scheme, which is a preventative scheme. So if school teachers or football coaches or anyone hears anything extreme, then they put children through a Prevent scheme, which is a de-radicalisation, counter-extremism scheme for young children and for people to be prevented from ending up as terrorists.
What does that mean? What does that mean? They go through a course? They go through a lecture? Do they have to pass a test? Like, what is it?
I mean, it's thought crimes. It means that counter-terrorism officers will turn up. So, for example, a young 15-year-old boy was at Speaker's Corner. This is the insanity of this country. Speaker's Corner is the history of the beacon and the one place in our country where you can have free speech and free thought and you can go and debate each other. Well, this 15-year-old child went down and said Islam is a violent ideology. And I ended up speaking, Islam is a violent ideology. Counter-terrorism police, because that's who they are, knocked at his mother's door. We're here to see your son about his comments. We're part of the Prevent counter-terrorism de-radicalisation scheme. So for exercising his free speech and stating a fact, and then what this does, you have to understand that there's been 12,000 last year, 12,000 arrests for social media posts. So whether it be an arrest for a social media post, but the figures for Prevent, which is the government interfering and the police interfering in free speech and children at schools, and what they've been wanting to do for so long so they can get the figures up. I'm now a statistic. I'm a statistic now as a non-Muslim terrorist. Yeah, I've been detained under terrorism legislation. So when they give the figures of the rising figures of non-Muslim or white or figures for terrorism, they're going through the roof. There's been a surge in far-right extremism. It's like, no, there's a surge in school children telling the truth or speaking about things in classes, and then you put them on de-radicalisation courses. So obviously I've just had a 2-day trial. It's an absolute attack on me, on the free press. And this is the maddest thing from this case. There's an entire row of mainstream media journalists. In the 2-day trial, we find out that the police officer admits that what they done was unlawful, that they had no grounds to originally detain me, that it took 30 seconds. There's 3 different police officers interviewed. Not one of the high profile or the admits of police failures, of abuse of power, not one journalist reported it. So Ezra Levant, I don't know if you know Ezra Levant. Ezra's from Rebel Media. So Ezra's flown in from Canada, which Ezra, each time I'm in court, we know they're going to do this. So we bring our own journalists in to live tweet. The judge stopped him live tweeting. Ezra stopped him. In the end, he got dragged out of court. They dragged him out. So because for the morning of the trial, when he was tweeting what was going on in court. Well, none of the mainstream media journalists are. So they ended up preventing Ezra, who's a journalist, an accredited journalist from Canada. They prevented him reporting for the second half of the trial. And in the end, they physically dragged him out of the court because then, as they've done for the last 2 decades, they totally control the narrative of what the public are getting told. And then when you look at the mainstream media's reporting of my case, nothing that actually happened that was actually newsworthy of police failures or police abuse has been reported. But I'll get my verdict now on the 4th of November. Maybe on the 4th of November, I'm a convicted terrorist, which is insane.
And what does that mean for you if you're a convicted terrorist? I mean, they got to
Well,
put you in jail, or they just label you as a terrorist. You
they can
lose
label you as
rights.
terrorist, yeah, and it could be prison, yeah. Do you know what's crazy? Anyone who's followed my story, in the last 18 months, just in the last 18 months, I went down to an anti-Semitism rally as a reporter and as a journalist to report it. And I was sat in a cafe waiting, and police officers come in, and this went viral everywhere. Police officers come in and said, "You need to leave London." And I said, "What? You need to leave London now. You're not welcome here." I said, "I'm a journalist. I'm here to report on this event. Yeah, it's a protest. It was the biggest gathering. It was after all, you had the Hamas protests every week for a year, and then you had people coming out to show solidarity with the Jewish community. So I'd gone down to report on that. I was receiving a brilliant reception from everyone. The police come in. I said, "I'm here to do my job, officer. Yeah, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I'm here to do my job as a journalist to report." And this video is viral. It went everywhere. As I go to leave the cafe after having my breakfast, he tells me I'm not allowed my breakfast. I said, "I'm having my breakfast. I've ordered it and paid for it." I have my breakfast. I go to leave. I'm attacked by literally 20 police officers. When I'm handcuffed, they CS gas me, pepper spray me from point blank range. Yeah. Now, bearing in mind, our entire country has watched for 12 months as jihadists with Hamas flags, Hezbollah flags, ISIS flags have taken over our capital city. They've attacked our monuments. They've called for the gassing of Jews. The hatred and level of hatred we saw in our country and across the West after October 7th was at a new level of insanity. And then I have gone as a journalist to report. So the police have done nothing for 12 months. Then they attack me, pepper spray me, but then they prosecute me. So after doing that, they then charged me. And do you know why? They give me bail conditions. So once they charged me, I had bail conditions. I was banned from my capital city for 6 months. I would go straight to prison if I entered inside the M25, which is a massive zone around London. The reason for all of this is where I've gone through this for 15 years. These stories sound insane. The reason for all of this is Hamas were allowed to take over, and their supporters were allowed to take over our capital city. If there's one person that could galvanise a resistance or a group of British men to come and stand against this extremism, then it's me. So rather than deal with the jihad, rather than deal with the terrorists, just like now our government just recognised the Palestinian state, insanity. But rather than deal with this, they dealt with me. So I was then arrested. I was attacked on camera. This went worldwide as a news story. I then went to court. We find out I get a not guilty. We find out the bail conditions were unlawful. They had no law to even do what they'd done. Yeah, but they don't care. So this is all in the last 18 months. That happens. I produce a documentary called Silence. I make a film. Yeah, I make a film and I release it. I get an 18-month prison sentence for that film. I spent 7 months on solitary confinement for that film. Yeah. Then, so anyone following my story has watched the anti-Semitism thing. They've seen me make a documentary. That documentary went to 167 million views. It absolutely showed the corruption of the judiciary with covert recordings. It was a humiliation for them. But they sent me to jail. I spent 7 months on solitary confinement for it. Then, most recently, I was at a train station in London. I come under hostile attack. I defended myself. And then a 10-second clip of a man laying on the floor unconscious was broadcast around the world. Yeah. And then the news story that I was on the run, which I wasn't. Yeah. So I've defended myself at a train station. I come under quite a lot of hostility for my political views because the media, just like they've done with Charlie Kirk, falsely put a target on me as far-right, racist, extremist. They want other people to do their job for them, to silence us, attack us. So I'm walking through a train station. A gentleman comes up. He follows me. He ends up following me, getting in my face, threatening me. He ends up trying to attack me. I defend myself. He ends up on the floor. Yeah. Now, the police had the entire CCTV footage, which showed me as a victim. Yeah. They put out a statement saying they were looking for me as an aggressor. That the minute I done it, I rang the police. The minute it happened, I rang a liaison officer we have for our events. And I said, "I've just had to defend myself. What do you want me to do? If you want me to go, I'm actually on a flight now because I'm going away for work. Any interview you need, I'm here." So they put all this out. So then I make an arrangement with my lawyer to change my flights to come back to do an interview. And when I get off the plane, the police are waiting like the army. And then they pump this story again of me being arrested at Luton Airport. I then get down into the interview in London and I watched a video which shows me being attacked and me being followed. So I'm sitting there like, why am I here? Why have I just been arrested so high profile in such a high? But then the media, it's all about the media story of all of this went everywhere. And then now, obviously, the public are seeing the terrorism trial. Now, the difference between 18 months ago, this has gone on for 10 years. But now I have social media. I can show the public, I can talk to the public, and I can show them the nonsense that this is. So that this terrorism trial, which usually I wouldn't have had a platform, I was censored for a 5-year period where you weren't even allowed to mention my name on Facebook. I was banned from Facebook, banned from YouTube, banned from X, banned from every one of them for no crime. Yeah, for no crime, I was banned from all of them. So this might have worked for 4 years, 5 years. It doesn't work anymore because the public, they don't realize.
Tommy, do you think they're targeting you? Because I've been watching you for a while. I see you pop up here and there. I saw you just go scorch earth on Piers Morgan a while back when he was trying to censor you about your opinions on the Quran, which was insane. But you know, is it because they have been radicalized? The government system have been radicalized, and you are like one of the most prominent people standing up against jihadists and the rape of young women and all of this other stuff. You think that's why? You think that they have gotten to a place where they hate strong, white, prominent people who are willing to stand up for the values of the historicity of their country? What is it about you specifically that they just cannot stand?
Well, they hate the values that built this country. They hate Christianity. They hate free speech. So the people who govern us hate everything that we hold dear and everything that made this such a beautiful nation. Now, what is it with me? I don't know if you're aware of the class system in the UK. I'm from working class. None of our politicians are from a working class background. No journalists are from a working class background. They're all middle class. They're all privately educated. So there is a massive class divide in the UK that you don't have, or I don't think you understand in the United States of America. So I didn't go to the right school. I don't talk the right way. I don't look the right way, and I don't walk the right way. I'm a working class man, which is what makes me, I guess, which is what many people follow me for, or feel that I'm them. I'm them. And we as working class people are supposed to just sit down and shut up. Now, where does mass immigration affect? Where is it brought to? It's brought to our communities. Whose daughters are being raped? They're ours, not the politicians. This isn't happening in their neighbourhoods. These Islamic ghettos are nowhere near them. They're not having to deal with this problem. So it's a multitude of reasons. But also, our Labour Party, your Democratic Party, are on their knees for every ideology that wishes to destroy this nation. Every ideology, whether it be Marxism, communism, whether it was Black Lives Matter, Islam, all of these, they bow to in fear. And also with the bloc Muslim vote, we just saw in our last election, the Labour Party, which is what recognising the Palestinian state was about, is about them trying to claw back the Islamic vote. Because we elected at our last election, we had 5 pro-jihadists, pro-Hamas supporting politicians elected within the Islamic community. As independents, they went away from Labour because Labour were refusing to be so against Israel. Obviously, Labour now recognise the Palestinian state, trying to pull back some of those Muslim votes. And our whole election was decided based on Gaza. Like our last election, the whole main talking point was about Gaza, because the bloc Muslim vote is that powerful. And I'll just give you a little so you can understand the demographical change. I was born in 1982 in a town called Luton, 30 miles north of London. When I was born, there was 1 mosque. There's now 45. Yeah? Now, there's now 45. Now, in 2013, which is when I was looking at the future of my hometown, I looked at the projected government growth forecast for communities in my hometown. And I looked at the community, and the Bangladeshi and Pakistani community were going to increase by 70 to 77%. The white and black community by 1.2 to 1.4%. So what this shows Labour, what is the future for Labour? Mm-hmm. They know, we know, it's the Islamic vote. Yeah. So that is when, and I've seen this. So I haven't had some golden ball. I've spoke about issues 20 years before they've happened, 15 years before they happened. Everything I've warned about has come into fruition. So I was attacked for so long as a hate monger, as a fear monger, and then everything I said, people would realise it was true. Yeah. I was trying to highlight problems. Now, why was that? Because I've grown up in a town where white English are a minority. I've grown up in a town and experienced the demographical change and the power that Islam has. Not just the power Islam has, but the way that fear paralyzes the police, it paralyzes the government, the way they just bend totally. and how in Luton there's two-tier policing. So two-tier policing now is part of British vocabulary. Everyone talks about it because we now know it exists. But I've seen it my whole life. Now that two-tier policing, black and whites are treated with iron fists in Luton. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're black or white. But the Islamic community are treated with kid gloves. Everything is pandered, and it's to do with Islam. So I've obviously seen the politics. I've grown up in a very diverse town. I've seen what works, what doesn't work. Pretty much every other community integrates and assimilates per se. It works pretty well, because if you lined up 30 of my friends, we're all the sons of immigrants. Yeah, whether it be St. Lucian, Jamaican, Bulgarian, Italian, Irish, we've all come from immigrant stock, and we love Britain. All of us love Britain. But the Islamic community, it just doesn't work. It's like mixing oil and water.
Yeah, Tommy, that's the point that I want to talk to you about. I got about 5 minutes left. I want to talk to you about that ideology, because I know that the naysayers and weirdos out there say that you're a racist when you bring up the Islamic jihadist theology. And I just want you to explain it to people, to make them very clear about the difference between saying a person is racist versus a person not accepting non-assimilating ideology that's violent. And so what do you say to people that say that your efforts are more racist than ideological?
I'd say that when I grew up in school, we had the Muslim playground and the non-Muslim playground. Yeah? In my town, the divide is through religious lines, not racial lines. I have witnessed a level of hostility and violence that I could never even think, and just couldn't understand it. I could never understand it. But it was from the Pakistani community. The sexual, Muslims make up 5 to 6% of the UK population, but 90% of the gang rape of young children in groups of men is Muslim men. 90% from 5 to 6%. 30% of the men convicted are called Mohammed. Now, these are facts. Okay, they're facts. We need to talk about them. We need to understand. There are 40,000 British Muslims on a terror watch list. 40,000. 1.2 million British Muslims want Sharia law in the UK. This is a problem. Yeah? 66% of British Muslims would not report on another Muslim who is going to join ISIS. Yeah? All of these issues are problems. Why? And when you try and talk about Islam, I just want to set the record straight again. Because I've grown up in Luton, I do know some great Muslims, and I love Muslims. Yeah, there are some Muslims that I've grown up with who I have great friendship with, but they're not following the teachings of Islam. So separate Muslims as people, because everyone here, if you live in an area, you're going to know some nice Muslims. Whether it be a kebab shop worker, taxi driver, you're going to know some nice people. They're people. Yeah, I don't talk about the people. I'm talking about Islam as an ideology and what it brings with us and what it does to freedom. And there is no freedom in Islam. There's no freedom at all. So I talk about Islam, and to have a view of Islam is our God-given right. It's our right, and it's not just our right. A country can deal with, when you have 5% or 4%, 6% Muslim population, the country can deal with these sorts of numbers, just about. Yeah, out of those 40,000 Muslims, 3,000 on terror watch list, 3,000 of them are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at a cost of £9 billion a year. Yeah? It costs £9 billion a year. Now, as the Islamic demographic doubles, which it keeps doubling. Yeah, I looked at Manchester after the Manchester terrorist attack, not the recent one. After Ariana Grande, I looked at the Islamic community in Manchester. I went and stood up in Manchester, and I didn't think Manchester had many problems, but I started researching it. Where I stood, within a 2-mile radius, 16 Muslims had gone to fight for ISIS. Within a 2-mile radius of where I was standing. So I said, look, you can think of this as an Islamic community, or there are enemy combatants to our nation living within this community. Now, the Islamic community in Manchester went from 25,000 to 50,000 in 10 years. Then the next 10 years, it went from 50,000 to 100,000. Now, if you do that again, 100,000 to 200,000, 200,000 to 400,000, the entire city's gone in 30 years. Now, America really needs to wake up, because under the last 8 years, or under Biden, with the 8 million he's flown through, he's allowed through, you used to have Islamic, Hispanic, Mexican, Hispanic immigration. And I know there's problems with it, but you have no idea what's coming. You have I'm looking thinking, geez, now, last 4 years, Joe Biden flooded your country, Somalians, Iraqis, Afghans, Pakistanis. Now, due to your immigration policies and that your government's immigration policies, you used to get the best. So when you was having Pakistani immigration, you'd have the well-educated from the capital city, because of the immigration system of getting people into America. They had to be educated. They had to have all these things. When you have mass open border immigration like we have, you've now got all the tribal, backward, Kashmiri, flooding through your borders, yeah, which is what we've had for generations. And the problems that are going to come with that, and the divide that's going to come with it, but not just the divide, the way
got one more minute.
Yeah, the way the Democrat Party are just going to bend totally, because the Islamic community vote in a military fashion. You've never seen anything like it. So in my hometown, this is, and Luton's just a blueprint for other towns and cities, and Europe's a blueprint for other countries like America. You need to stop Islamic immigration. You need to get control of the prisons. They're going to build an army through your prisons, because they're building an army through ours. The last prison I was in for my film, Solitary Confinement, as I said, Muslims make up 6% of the UK. 40% of the prison was Islamic. 40%. Yeah, 40%. They're converting an army, and no one's stopping them. So, and that's happening here. It's going to be happening in the United States of America. You need a massive wake up. America needs to look at Europe and see where we failed and just end it. Stop it. Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop Islamic immigration. Stop it.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. My wife is like a huge supporter of what you say and what you do, and she believed the exact same thing. I mean, it is out of control in the United States of America. They're capitulating to all of this Islamic stuff, and we know that that the ideology is wrong.
And they're capitulating already. Wait until they get to such a higher percentage. You're in trouble. We're all in trouble.
Yeah. So, hey, man, I appreciate you coming on. We got to run to another interview. Hey, we should do this again if you have time, and we can flesh out a lot more stuff. But, man, God bless you, and we're praying for you, man. And I hope that the verdict comes out in your favor, and that these nut jobs in your country doesn't put you down or end up, bringing that stuff to America. So we're praying for you. We support you, man, and you be blessed.
Bro, I'm on a state visit to Israel tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. I'm back in 10 days, so we'll catch up anytime after that. Thank you.